Today, I've got something truly unusual. This is a content creators tournament across all Supremacy games, where I finally got the chance to bully everyone you probably don't like. I'm joking, of course. Unfortunately, not everyone. Some of them are on my team. Or maybe they were the ones who bullying me? Who knows? Either way, I hope this baits you into watching till the very end. While you're looking at the player list, let me briefly explain the map. It's a standard World War III map, split into two halves for our teams. Each team could freely choose any playable nations on their side, and then conquer the remaining AI. However, conquering them wasn't that easy, because these weren't regular bots. These bots actually research and mobilize units. And let's be honest, just by knowing how to press the mobilize and research buttons, they're already better than 70% of players. It's also worth noting that some players were touching World War III game for the first time. My team had one such player. The enemy team had two, which is why they had one extra slot. Of course, I wasn't fooled by the free territory capture idea. Unlike a certain well-known commander in our community, the leader of the Alliance Win with Style Enigma Vanquisher, who was playing as Algeria. Personally, I prefer chilling. Just building arms industry in every city and complaining in chat that I lack resources instead of actually capturing them myself. That's exactly why I picked the USA, with its cozy 9 cities. As for the rules, each player was allowed to mobilize only one elite unit. Officers, ballistic missiles, ICBMs, as well as chemical and nuclear warheads and spies were banned. Everything else was allowed, even satellites. I won't bore you too much with the preparation phase. So let's jump straight to day 31. Only 2 days remained before the war started, and suddenly we discovered one unexpected problem. Actually, two. The first one was the victory point requirement. As you can see, we were already close to 3,000 points. So about a week earlier, we had completely stopped expanding, just to leave at least some time for the final battle. The second problem was electronics. We had an ungodly amount of them. We roughly planned who would build what, but we didn't account for the fact that we'd conquer an absurd amount of territory, and that our real bottleneck would be rare materials. So I confiscated electronics from everyone who didn't need them, and started mobilizing regular attack helicopters. Of course, they're not amazing against heavy stealth fighters' usage, but they're a perfect way to burn excess electronics. My build in this match consisted of attack and elite helicopters, stealth fighters, stealth UAVs, and a slightly under-leveled AWACS. On top of that, I had 400 air munitions ready for my air minions. You're probably wondering how I managed to research and mobilize all of this. Well, first, I had the biggest economy at that point. And second, I complained the loudest in chat about lacking resources. So there you have it, the ultimate recipe for success. I highly recommend adopting it in your own alliance battles. As you can see, 2 days had passed, and now I was flying a whole swarm of stealth fighters back and forth along the front line. Back and forth. Back and forth. My job was to protect the artillery divisions disguised as elite tanks. And of course, the satellite. I hope you appreciated how carefully I was protecting the satellite by flying behind it instead of in front of it. That's not a misplay, it's all part of the strategy. I was protecting it from a backstab. Flying close to the front line was scary, because Belarus had commandos. And commandos, as we all know, completely shut down stealth units if they're positioned correctly. So in voice chat, we agreed with Bolivia that he would move his satellite a bit deeper into the rear. So there I was, sweating heavily, and flying rather aimlessly along the front line, while listening to Enigma preaching in my ear that one of my wings had already been sitting on patrol for 3 whole seconds. Eventually, I got tired of waiting and decided to attack the 2 closest targets with helicopters, without any recon. Why without recon, you ask? Well, obviously because I have built more helicopters than all of our enemies had units combined, and I was producing 6 more every single day. Unjoking, of course. The real reason was the extremely tight time limit, and my desire to test AA trigger timings. On top of that, seeing no enemy fighters near the front line made me believe in myself a bit too much. Or maybe not too much? Let's find out. To increase helicopter survivability on the way to the target, you need to fly in one massive blob and split at the very last moment. That way, if the enemy has stealths or AA triggers, you only eat 1 hit and still have a chance to survive. Naturally, cover from allied stealth fighters doesn't hurt either. And who do you think was covering me? Of course, me. That's why our coordination was so flawless. On the way in, I took a hit from a railgun division, but I still managed to strike successfully, completely wiping the Belarusian division and dealing solid damage to the Iranian railgun stack. Unfortunately, I couldn't see exactly what I killed, because we were playing in unranked mode, so content creators wouldn't damage their precious stats and would feel safer attacking more aggressively. By the way, near Italy you can see the Iranian fleet made up of pretty much every ship type except submarines, though not all of them were max level. Meanwhile, our Algeria had frigates and elite submarines. We'll come back to this front later and gloat together. Now let's watch the satellite in action. Just as a reminder, in most alliance battles and community events like Battle Royale, satellites are banned because they're considered too strong. Personally, I don't really agree, especially when it's a level 1 satellite, and especially when it's controlled by someone who wants to use it like a battering ram against city gates. So yeah, I quickly killed the first Egyptian satellite. Now guess which word in that sentence was a spoiler. Right now we can also see the composition of the Indian division, because it's inside satellite vision and is currently attacking. In situations like this, the full stack composition is visible, unlike those 3 signatures near Lviv. And what do we see? None of the units are max level, and there are a whole 5 motorized infantry units. Ideally, it would have been mechanized infantry if you really want to use infantry, plus something that could reveal stealth. But with such a composition, the stacks were almost defenseless. I won't be too harsh on India. At least he actually showed up to fight on the front line, which already puts him ahead of some other members of his team. I sent my air minions to defend our colonies in Italy, which were being nibbled on by a predatory Iranian division. On the way there, purely by accident, I stumbled upon a Russian satellite. Turns out their team had not 1, but 2 players building satellites. So I quickly destroyed the second satellite. However, that wasn't the end of it. Its position, along with the location of the previously destroyed Egyptian satellite, gave me an idea. He was simply patrolling somewhere near the front line, which meant that to find them, I only needed to sweep a narrow strip of enemy territory with my scouts. At the same time, Russian fighters appeared on the northern front, both regular and naval air superiority fighters. On top of that, he was firing level 2 cruise missiles at our tank in Bigensк. But today I had opened a fortune cookie, and it told me that missiles with 4 HP wouldn't be very effective. So I was so unimpressed that I didn't even bother flying out to kill those planes. As for my own activity, I continued flying around bullying every possible air target. This time, my victim was a helicopter squadron sitting on patrol. I managed to destroy one of them. Mission accomplished. The life purpose of a fighter had been fulfilled. Right before the helicopters arrived, I found the 3rd satellite. At that speed, it wasn't getting away from me, so I detached one of my Algerian squadrons for the job and turned a space object into a naval one, or more precisely, into a submarine. While I was busy micromanaging my air minions, I didn't even notice how I casually destroyed a 4th satellite cruising through space above the Libyan coastline. In the game's community, satellites are usually used to scare small children, yet somehow I managed to find and eliminate them with suspicious ease. This is an incredible loss of aura. A few minutes later, an Iranian gunship wing returning from a Budapest raid flew straight into my fighter wing and got vaporized in a single dogfight. You can see confirmation of my words in the newsfeed. On the left, you can also spot French losses. For some reason, he keeps losing strike fighters that were meant to clear AI territory. On the bright side, his artillery losses were minimal. In the Mediterranean, I apparently developed a taste for satellites and started hunting them everywhere. So I began sweeping the area with individual squadrons. It was highly unlikely that anything here posed a real threat to me. In any case, nothing happened, so I kept flying as arrogantly as possible. Meanwhile, Iranian ships were doing the one and only thing fleets in alliance formats are truly capable of: aimlessly bombarding empty cities. Sure, they can slightly reduce victory points, but a navy has no purpose here. Only the hope that someone on the enemy team will also build a fleet, so you can finally have a naval battle. And then go back to aimlessly sailing around and bombing empty cities again. But this time with the comforting feeling of being useful. On the Belarusian front, as you might have guessed, true professionals met. They simply stood in aggressive mode and bombarded each other non-stop. The only difference was that friends had a much better build, 7 MLRS in 1 stack, while the opponent only had 2 or 3. Let me remind you, both opponents were playing World War III for the first time. Still, that didn't stop me from enjoying the sheer comedy of the situation, where artillery players just showed up to the front line shot at each other, and stood there. They won't be standing for long, though. From time to time, my helicopter bees conduct bold raids for Indian honey, which, by the way, is barely guarded and lacks any serious air defense. In short, the target was tasty, defenseless, and I simply couldn't walk past it. By the way, over Romania, you can see me flying a mixed squadron of UAVs and a fighter. Obviously, I don't attack deep targets without recon. However, everything was going so one-sided that at some point I genuinely wanted to get caught. Sadly, the enemy wasn't willing to help me with that. Over Serbia, I had just attacked an ASW helicopter. Finding a helicopter returning straight to refuel is, of course, not exactly rocket science. Still, the lack of AWACS was already very noticeable, and you'll soon see why. I found the 5th satellite already over Egypt's homeland, and immediately destroyed it. If the enemy has no AWACS, the decisive advantage is probably already on our side. Although, who am I kidding, it's definitely on our side. Because my helicopters were flying around freely and mauling defenseless ground units like a predatory eagle hunting small, vulnerable radents. Not because I'm insanely sweaty, but because the enemy allows it. Meanwhile, Algerian special forces finally arrived at the front line. Maybe they'll unmask something soon, because we know for a fact that Belarus has commandos. Summing up this phase, together with French artillery, I managed to wipe enemy forces fairly quickly and start our main push through Romania. However, Belarus still had troops left, and that's where we're heading next. While that was happening, the Iranian fleet stopped bombarding Venice and tried to move into more open waters. At the same time, I was flying over airfields like Count Dracula, looking for my next victim, unsuccessfully for now. Soon enough, voice chat delivered fresh intel. A Belarusian scout had been spotted on our territory near Warsaw. This is exactly why playing as a team matters. Someone is always there to notice enemy stealth units or special forces. So, I demasked the saboteur with my UAVs, and Spain finished him off with a strike fighter wing. You can also see Argentina doing the exact same thing I do, using an identical stealth helicopter wing to chase down unfortunate divisions fleeing from us. Near Budapest, another scout was unmasked, and I immediately ordered my helicopters to strike before he could disappear. Suddenly, instead of retreating, he started preparing for an air assault. At that moment, the lack of AWACS became clearer than ever. Luckily, the enemy special forces decided to perform their flight right over units capable of unmasking him. And overall, he was doing it right in the middle of our villain lair, so catching him was easy. By the way, this short moment shatters a big part of the myths about special forces in our community. The main one being that spec ops are visible during air assault. That's simply not true. However, they can be unmasked by units capable of revealing air stealth targets, and detected by level 4 AWACS as a helicopter type signature. For this reason, my level 3 AWACS is now useless. Now let's take a look at what was actually not useless. Of course, I'm talking about the naval battle under the command of Enigma Algerian. At this point, he was quite successfully, and almost completely unpunished, biting the enemy with his elite submarines. And for reasons known only to him, he was covering them with frigates. Let me remind you, the enemy does have ASW helicopters, but he couldn't really use them properly because of my fighters and satellite. Luckily, the fight didn't stay that one-sided. This whole pack of ships sitting in shallow waters got tired of taking damage and started pushing along the Italian coastline. Right now, they were forcing Algerian submarines into deeper water, where their speed drops to something like your stair climbing speed after playing too much WW3. On top of that, the enemy had destroyers capable of unmasking Enigma and stopping his vanquishing. Apparently hoping to draw attention away from his submarines, he sent his frigates forward to soak damage. However, something much better happened, something that brought me far more genuine joy than even successfully bullying enemy ground forces with helicopters. At the exact moment those frigates were passing near the submarines, Iran attacked them and splashed subs, destroyed 2 of them. Nothing in this match made me happier than that moment. After that, the Algerian submarine successfully reached the Libyan coast, entering a zone that was safe for him. From time to time, I flew nearby with my fighters and caught helicopters that were easily spotted thanks to the almighty satellite. First, the submarines hid in this coastal dead end and attacked from there. Then, after all the destroyers were eliminated, they engaged the remaining ships in close contact combat to finish them faster. In short, naval victory was already close. I even took the opportunity to finish off one of the cruisers with my fighters. There was no real reason for it, just the desire to give something to do to planes that had no other job. Argentina apparently felt the same taste of impunity that I did, and started using helicopters to the fullest, and quite successfully too. He didn't even bother flying them in a large stack. It would be really nice if someone punished him for that. I would really enjoy it. From time to time, I flew my UAV around to check enemy compositions. Just now, I unmasked a level 1 Russian anti-air battalion. I could at least understand it if those TDS were max level, able to damage our stealths from long range. But putting in this much effort to defend an empty city from cruise missiles, which, as you might guess, we don't even have, looks excessive. A few minutes later, our satellite unmasked no less than 6 wings of Russian fighters. They had never entered combat and they didn't even try. It's not like aircraft incapable of unmasking our stealths could do much anyway. Still, the fact that they didn't even attempt to interfere or hunt our normal attack helicopters struck me as strange. Soon after that, they retreated deep into Russian territory for eternal parking. They never fought, never tried, and never will. A sad story indeed. Having run out of respectable targets, I started attacking a flying Indian infantry, UAV, and some ground troops. I don't really have a perfect counter to infantry, so obviously, hitting them with a wing of stealth fighters works just fine. Over Bulgaria, I was also bullying infantry, flying in some unknown direction. And that's simply because the enemy refused to provide me with any more interesting targets for my air harassment. In Ukraine, Enigma used his special forces to unmask a Belarusian commando, and I immediately ordered my helicopters to strike, so the enemy minion wouldn't have a single chance to escape. That was a priority target, one that could seriously interfere with our airstrikes. My 2 wings of elite stealth helicopters reached Minsk and almost certainly delivered a painful blow. You all know how absurd their stats are with air munitions. Unfortunately, we'll never know exactly how many units I killed. The mysteries of unranked mode will keep that secret forever. A few minutes later, I suddenly remembered that we also had a second flank in Sweden. I was reminded of it because people in chat started screaming that special forces were doing inappropriate things to our AA units. And believe it or not, it was absolutely true. Belarus used an air assault to get into Sweden and started attacking our mobile SAM stack. Naturally, the fun wasn't going to last forever, and I had already sent my helicopters and planes to deal with this audacious potato invasion. Right now, artillery was attacking the scouts, and I also pressed the attack button just to make sure they'd get a guaranteed kick if they decided to go invisible. Meanwhile, in Belarusian homeland, a wing of attack helicopters arrived and wiped everything out. The biggest joke is that it wasn't even a stealth wing. It had been flying over enemy territory for an hour each way, completely untouched. I attacked a Special Forces division, and judging by the health points I lost, they were on the ground. But now we knew their exact location, which meant their respawn timer was about to start. A few minutes later, Belarus once again launched an air assault over units capable of unmasking him. He was trying to reach our airfield, and unfortunately, only my lonely fighter could stop him. Luckily, that was more than enough. Meanwhile, using UAVs, I revealed a Kazakh artillery division. It consisted of many low-level units and was clearly easy prey for our helicopters. That immediately caught Argentina's attention, and he flew in to attack yet another vulnerable target, forgetting about everything else. Since I'm a very generous person, I decided to let him have that kill, and instead went after a completely unremarkable pile of enemy units, which, of course, I planned to scout first with UAVs. Speaking of Sweden, the remnants of the division did manage to land at the airfield after all, but they were quickly destroyed by my reserve stealth wing, which had been delayed earlier due to replacement to another airfield. In Austria, we found yet another Special Forces division cheekily attempting to land on our airfield, the one we had already abandoned due to the shifting front line. I left a UAV patrolling overhead so our air units could keep constant eyes on the target. At the same time, my helicopters finally reached the easternmost Belarusian provinces. I demasked 25 Kazakh units and, as a bonus, revealed another commando. Naturally, I decided to remove the commando as well. For that to work, my UAV had to keep him revealed at the exact moment of the strike. Everything went smoothly, and I almost completely erased all those enemy minions who had been chilling far away from the battlefield. Like a piranha that had tasted blood, Argentina caught the scent of Kazakh divisions and rushed in as well, attacking the target with his Argentinian mosquitoes. Soon enough, he reached his prey and, jumping out of the river onto the shore, completely vaporized what was left of the local forces. I should mention that I attacked them being in the river, purely to maintain my image as a predatory fish. We also started dealing with the airfield invasion step by step. I struck the enemy several times and was now finishing off the last surviving battalion of the division. By the way, those special forces you see on the airfield right now are not the enemy. That's Algeria, so everything is under control. 30 minutes later, while hunting for new targets, and especially enemy commandos, I unmasked a small infantry division. At the same time, Argentina once again flew off to attack an artillery division we had spotted earlier. To be fair to Belarus, he kept resisting and continued trying to catch our air units on airfields. However, once we understood his tactic, defending against it became easy, thanks to UAVs. Their advantage as early warning scouts is simple. Commandos are guaranteed to attack them with AA, which gives me an alert notification even if I'm not watching our weir. So, continuing my obsession with river-based attacks, I destroyed yet another commando using regular attack helicopters. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, I had built more helicopters than all our enemies had mobilized units combined. That's why I didn't hesitate to attack even an infantry division trying to run away from us. Sure, elite attack helicopters are not the most efficient anti-infantry unit. Still, they're more than enough to bully defenseless low-level troops, 8 of which I had just destroyed in a single airstrike. Another Special Forces division, 6 units strong, was demasked, and I sent the nearest helicopter groups to deal with it. Belarus was the only opponent throughout the entire battle who actually advanced toward us, instead of running away, so give me a like for his bravery. A few minutes later, everything was gone, and I flew off to continue my usual mischief. Our satellite pushed deep into enemy territory, and amassed 2 Iranian helicopters flying across the battlefield toward Finland with unknown purpose. I didn't miss the opportunity, and quickly eliminated them. Suddenly, I noticed that a Spanish strike wing was consistently taking damage while sitting on patrol. Obviously, that meant only one thing. Somewhere nearby, a commando was standing quietly and slowly shooting arrows at our aircraft. Given Spain's patrol radius, pinpointing the commando's location was fairly easy. To put an end to his little sabotage act, I brought in my UAV and all 3 wings of stealth helicopters, which, by the way, still amounted to a respectable 14 units. Retribution arrived swiftly, and the saboteur was sent straight to the newsfeed to join what remained of his army. However, my war against commandos was far from over. I kept scouting enemy air bases and soon discovered 2 UAVs on patrol. Unluckily, I flew a bit too close right as AA activated and received a light slap from a Belarusian division. Incidentally, on that very same airbase, 7 Chinese stealth fighters were parked. So if you had been wondering where they were and what they were doing, here they are. And, spoiler alert, that's still not all of their air force. A few minutes later, I spotted yet another commando. Naturally, I wanted him gone before committing to a helicopter strike. I decided to exploit a mechanic where engaging a target in an air battle also hits everything else inside the patrol radius, including ground targets. So I attacked the saboteur by engaging a UAV at the same time. But he was way tougher than expected and refused to die. However, a second attempt using the exact same maneuver, this time by attacking the second enemy UAV, worked perfectly. With that, the path to Moscow was finally clear. As you can see, we had already secured the required victory points. And this was the very last air raid I could squeeze in before the match ended. So I brought all 13 of my helicopters to attack the ducks sitting on the airfield. You know your stealth game didn't go as planned when the enemy flies across half the map just to bonk you with his mosquitoes. In total, I managed to wipe out all ground forces and an additional 6 stealth fighters, my only air kills in this entire match. 30 minutes later, another 16 aircraft returned to the same airfield after refueling. Sadly, match time wouldn't allow me to hit them again. And that was the moment the match quietly accepted its fate, ending shortly after in a predictable victory. Now let's move on to the most interesting part, answering why it was all so easy for us, and taking a look at what our opponents actually had left. Which, conveniently, is the answer for the question. I recorded this part on mobile, because for some reason nothing worked on PC. In the Mediterranean, we see a handful of low-level submarines which, just like the rest of the Russian forces, never once entered combat, nor even tried. Near the Suez Canal, the final 6th satellite is still orbiting in space, hiding from me so I wouldn't destroy it. In Cairo, there are 3 stealth aircraft. Definitely not what we were looking for. And as far as I can tell, they didn't fight either. Now for the real delicacy. Although, strictly speaking, the tastiest leftovers belong to China, while Saudi Arabia is more of an appetizer. His build was roughly similar to mine in Argentina's, just unfinished and forgotten. As for China, he still had over 30 aircraft left, almost all of them stealth fighters. Nearly all forces that actually tried to play the game were destroyed, and I'm pretty sure the players who lost their armies are now deeply grateful to the NPCs for the best air cover possible.